is sit back and relax a bit, because I want to kind of take you through the point of our class together. One of the things I hear over and over again from students that I've had in at least 243, if not 243, 244, I got 3 emails from former 105 students over the summer. Thanks, man. Now I can't go to Canita and gamble with a clear conscience. Because you told me I'm going to lose money. I'm like, you didn't know that before? Those buildings are huge. You have to pay for them. How does Vegas keep its lights on all the time? Because you lose. On average. That's overtime. Overtime. Listen, I got you guys trained so well. Overtime. So the idea is that you are surrounded by this stuff in your lives. And it's amazing how many ideas I'm able to get just by listening to the news. So here's one. I didn't have time, unfortunately, to update this one before today. But it doesn't matter. Because this example is almost, the mistake made in this example is made all along. Every media outlet has made a similar. I had a new data set ready to go for today, but I didn't have time to type it up. It deals with motorcycle helmet law from Florida from a couple years ago. But anyway, I just decided to leave this one in because I couldn't screw with it in the time I had. So maybe you remember this. You probably don't, because it was a bit back now. But in 2005, 733 food poisonings happened in U.S. school cafeterias. And I remember watching this. This is back when I had time to watch television too. And they showed this great video of rats running out of dumpsters into cafeterias. Now, I mentioned I used to wash dishes when I was in college. I never didn't see rats in our dining halls. This is Delaware. Maybe the rig's a little bit different there. But it's like, they weren't getting into the food. They were getting into the trash. It wasn't that big of a deal. They were separated from the food. But they made a big deal of the 733. So I said, my God, there's a lot of kids getting sick. So I decided to do a little digging. This is fact checking. This is why there's not much math. Watch the math that we do here. Precious little math. CDC says there are 76 million food poisonings per year in the US. I checked that recently. It's just about the same. It hasn't changed very much. Okay? 76 million food poisonings. Now here's an assumption I made. You have to make assumptions sometimes when you're trying to argue these things. I assumed about 300 million Americans, which is not quite right. It's about 310, somewhere in that neighborhood. 300 million Americans, on average, eating 3 meals per day. Again, this is on average, right? I can't say. I know for a fact, I ate half of a breakfast today. Trying to get 3 things done and eating my breakfast at the same time while I was at my desk, and it's sitting back up there, hopefully not collecting flies. But on average, I think 3 meals a day is a safe bet to say. Dimensional analysis, I think that's fair, right? Good. Yeah. So, 3 meals per day, the rate of food poisoning in America, work with me here, 76 million food poisoning cases. Dimensional analysis over the number of meals eaten. So you've got 300 million times 3 times 365, the number of days in a year-ish. It's approximately, right? Works out to be 0.0002. That's 2 in 10,000 or 1 in 5,000. So what that means is if you spread that out equally across all Americans, basically every 5,000 meals you eat, you're going to get sick one of those. Maybe. On average over time. Okay, you might get sick 3 days in a row from 3 meals because there's some kind of a link between them or because there's some kind of fluctuation. But if you average it out, 1 in 5,000. Remember that number, 1 in 5,000. Okay, so remember the 733? I went deeper because included in all of those sickenings were also the kids, right? The kids were there. So I said, okay, at that in 2005 there were 75.8 million school kids in America. Now I made an assumption. You guys can decide the validity of this. I assumed they were in school 180 days. Is that fair? I mean, I know Ben Lapine tends to drop when the budgets are tight. They tend to drop days. Is 180 fair? If you don't think it is, that's totally fine. Just change that number to what you think it should be. Maybe 175, maybe 170.
Well, that does just increase the...
Good, yeah, thank you. Good, thank you. Like excellent. Let's come back then if you don't mind. Good, good. So 180, you can change that if you don't think it fits. But I said 75.8 million meals eaten. I'm assuming kids are only eating 1 meal at school. That might be 2, right? It might be 2, which would be times 2 down here, which would make this even be more ridiculous. But look at the rate of food poisoning in schools. 0.0000005. What is it, 5 in like a billion or something like that? 5 in 100 million? I don't know what that is that far out. But it's smaller, isn't it? It's smaller than this one, isn't it? Whoops. It's smaller than that one. Which means it's actually 4,000 times less. Which means the 733 kids that they put up on the screen there, that was actually something to be celebrated from this argument. I mean, sure, it's more than 0, which makes us sad because kids are getting sick. But the only way we should be alarmed is if that number approached the rate of the general population. As a matter of fact, maybe we should slow down and eat at Skyview, as opposed to eating wherever you're going to eat your lunch. Now you're going to think about that, won't you? Of course you will, because that's what averaging is all about. But this is the idea. They were trying to make the point that this was an outlier. I've got a quiz planned for you for next week about the exact same idea with enrollment numbers at COCC. Have you guys heard the enrollment dance at COCC? Enrollment's down! Enrollment's down! Let's look at it again. Is it down today?
No, I said, did they come today?
Did it? Oh, no. It starts coming around in March, and then it just keeps coming and coming and coming. And it's, so I'm going to have you guys analyze something similar based on data that came across my desk like 2 days ago. So fun, applicable, gives you an intelligent way of describing numbers and their quantifiable sizes. This one came across my Facebook page about 6 months ago. I love this one. So go ahead, just read this one. I'm not going to read it. Read that. Read that. Connell.org. Deaths by hammers, yes, that's 496. Deaths by hammers.
More than that's great.
Believable. I think it's believable, and I think that's news media's fault. Tell me your name again.
David.
Davidson, thank you. I love the response, and it's a good one. You know, 496 deaths by hammers, how does that work with semi-automatic weapons? It makes sense to me, only because I've been disillusioned by media reporting. Media will always report a semi-automatic weapon death. They're not going to talk about a hammer death. They probably happen. I would assume. I have no. First of all, I have no idea where these numbers come from, or if they're correct. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's about twice as much, because you're not going to hear about those domestic violence. Unfortunately, those domestic violence crimes, which breaks my heart, because they should be prosecuted even well. But that's the point. The media will always tell you about a plane that crashes and kills 200 or more, especially when it's an American plane. What they will not tell you is you are more likely to get killed by getting kicked by a horse than in a plane crash. Statistically. Because you don't hear about the horse kick deaths in the news every day. You hear about the planes that go down. There was a hand up somewhere. Please, tell me your name.
Sandra.
Sandra, go.
I was going to say, hammer does are more, I guess, probably more likely. Anyway, more people own hammers
Then semi-automatic weapons. That kind of makes sense too, right?
Yeah.
More people own horses than take airplane trips, on average, over the entire population, right?
Well, no one's talking about taking away your right to have a hammer.
Well, and then we come to the point of this, correct? This wonderful statement: you are 600 times more likely to die by using your Obamacare than by a semi-automatic rifle. So feel sick. I'm not going to play political cards here. I don't want to play political cards right here. But how does any of this have to do with anything? 195,000 died by medical malpractice. What is left out there? And I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. When you compare 195,000 medical malpractice to the 323 by semi-automatic weapons, what is being left out?
The number of people who own semi-automatic.
Absolutely. Access to versus maybe a rate of death versus a number of deaths, since there are fewer semi-automatic weapon owners than people that go to the doctor for sickness. Yes, rates versus raw numbers, very good point. Tell me your name too.
Brian?
Brian, thank you, go.
So what constitutes medical malpractice?
What definition, what constitutes medical malpractice, right? What if someone's so sick they're going to die anyway, and they get any kind of advice? Is that considered malpractice because they died and the advice didn't work? I don't know, I'm throwing this out there, Devin. You can kick in here too if you want to. The definitions are missing here, right? We haven't defined anything. You can make these numbers say anything you want because you haven't told me what the actual term medical malpractice means. Or even what that means. Is that a particular kind of gun? Is that a particular kind of hammer? I mean, there's all kinds of wiggle room. And of course, this is why you have to, I've got some neat quizzes based on graphics that come across, like my Facebook page, that infuriate people. All you gotta do is stop and think about them and realize they're kind of vacuous. They're kind of vacuous. Here are some numbers that blow my mind, though. And I've got the data sources for these. I updated these about 3 days ago, so hopefully they're a little more accurate now. Go ahead and read some of these. Mind-boggling, in my opinion.
It's a futuristic Super Bowl.
those jump out at you guys? That's like, holy crap. Which one of those is the most surprising to you? Or is the media completely ruined you? Nothing surprises you anymore. That's possible, right? That's possible. I'm old enough to be surprised by certain things. Which one of those break quick kind of like, what the hell? I can't believe that. Which one?
Facebook.
Facebook? Facebook is now, I believe, the second largest country on earth. It was the third, behind China and India. Now I believe only China eclipses it in population. If you want to call it population. Bad definition, right, Ryan? Good. In the time it took you to the last sentence, you uploaded 25,000 photos. Blows my mind. I'm worried about my connection to make sure you guys can find stuff. Stop uploading your damn videos from your rock concerts. I'm kidding, don't stop doing that. Keep doing it. Anything else grab you as surprising? The plastic bottles. Chris Jordan, we're going to talk about Chris Jordan on Wednesday again. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. $250 billion plastic bottles, U.S. alone. So on average, spread that out over us. 300 million, spread $250 billion out. That's basically...
No idea how to say it.
It's hard to process that number, right? It's hard to process that number. 1,000 bottles-ish per one of us. That's hard to think about, right? That's hard to think about. I have to define the word uses, right, Ryan? We have to define the word uses. Plastic bottle, I think, is a fair definition, but define use. Does that mean use and then reuse, or does that mean use and then get rid of? And again, if you want the sources, they're right here. They're right here. You can check them out.
But I would wonder what the definition of 100 species, like species could be almost anything.
Yes, well, the definition of a species is actually well defined. It's a zoological differentiation.
Because I'm thinking like bacteria.
Oh yeah, that's a species,
Yeah.
and we can lose bacterial species.
That's nothing that's common, and it constantly grows, changes.
Right, we're thinking like an ostrich or a bird or a mammal. It could be a bacteria or a plankton or
So
something
it's
like
like
that.
Homo erectus is gone, but Homo
Oh, I
sapiens
see
back.
what it evolved into something
Yeah.
else. I see what you're saying. Well, that's where you have to go to the World Resources
I mean,
Institute
that's
and back check
like the
how they
species thing
define
is
it.
destroyed because it's like,
Because it changes
just
something
changed.
else. I got you. Well, that's where you want to check. I assume the former, not the latter. That's where you can fact check my numbers. Nobody's blown away by the 1 billion people watching the World Cup.
Everyone's that.
Everyone's
You see how much to call it something.
Billion people. Think about that number. 1 billion. That's 1 in 7 people on Earth watching the same sporting event. I remember watching a video in '06 of a tribe in Africa huddled around a TV hooked to a car battery watching the World Cup final. Remember the one when Zidane headbutted the dude from Italy? Remember that? 1 billion people watched Zidane get his red card and kick himself out of the last game. That blows me away. 1 billion people. There's a Super Bowl, 115 million. Now granted, that's a sizable chunk of the United States, right? That's 1 in 3 Americans. But we're only one tiny chunk of the world. Okay, you're not as amazed as I am. That's okay. That one blows my mind. That one blows my mind. The whole
It's the most popular sport in the world.
in the world. In the world. The beautiful game. People don't understand it in America. I understand. I get it. I watch my son play, you know, he's 6 going on to first grade soccer. And people go to there like, they're just running around kicking a ball. I'm like, yeah. Like, what's the point? I'm like, there is no point. That is the point. That's the game.
And does this,
Why do they call it football? Because they're using their feet. What do you call it football?
does this mean like TV's on or?
Yes. Well, how they define viewership.
Because we could look at, I mean, when I was in China, there were thousands to just one TV.
To one TV, exactly. So in the estimation has been averaged for just that. When I mentioned seeing a tribe sitting around, that average took into account there were 30 people watching that game. Yes, not just TVs,
Okay, I was just wondering,
viewership.
like,
Oh, it's gotta be viewership.
Yeah.
Nielsen has this down to a science, for sure. National debt we'll talk about on Wednesday as well. These are true, I think these are true. It's shaking our heads. Yeah, this is why I like giving you guys free textbooks. So, all right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. This is just stuff that I've happened upon. Tuition hikes. No news to you. Your tuition does go up. The COCC board and the administration of the school do a fantastic job of keeping COCC affordable. It is definitely in the bottom third, if not bottom 10th, of cost per credit hour in the state of Oregon. And that is saying something. That is saying something compared to what it could be. A lot of times schools balance their budgets on the backs of the students. I am so thankful that the board of directors of the school does not do that. When they raise tuition, they hate it. They hate doing it. They try to spread it out over years as opposed to doing it in one chunk. So this one, when it went 4 credits in 1 year, the next year it was $4 a credit more. It caused a bit of an uprising with students. And the Broadside wrote an article including this graph to compare and contrast what tuition was going to cost in the old model and the new model. Any problem with that graph? Or is the graph trying to say something? I mean, it's saying something, but is it trying to pick one side? or the other?
It seems like it's showing a more
There's a proportion.
opposing side to the tuition
I agree.
increase.
Tell me your name again.
Alicia.
Alicia, thank you. I agree. It is trying politically to show you, oh my God, look at how much more we have to pay now than we had to pay before. And here's the thing. If you took these numbers away, I would actually agree with that political argument, because you look at that number right there and you apply it to here, that's a third more, isn't it? Like that
Yeah.
is roughly a third of this
It's
bar.
unproportionate.
I did the same joking thing today. There were 8 people waitlisted for my class, one more trip. Like, oh my God, it increased by 12.5%. Well, it did. 1 and 8 is 12.5%. It's also a stupid thing to say. But the thing is this indeed 1/3 more than this?
No.
Look, oops.
That's more.
Right. What I've done here is I've drawn the same graph, but can you see how it's the same exact graph? What did I do that this graph back here didn't do? So let me ask a question. What's the difference between 560 and 528?
32.
$32, which is exactly what it should be. 8 credits, $4 more per credit is $32. That's $32, right? If that's 32, what should this be?
It should be a lot less than
It should be about $100, yeah? The problem is, this is clearly not starting where?
0.
This isn't starting at 0. This is starting somewhere in the neighborhood of $428. What I did is I went ahead and made the graph start at 0 to show you 428 going to 406, or whatever it was, I forget what the numbers are now. 520 to 560, thank you. Now all of a sudden, yes, the red bars are larger than the blue bars, yeah, of course. But they're not screaming, oh my God, it went up by a third. No, it went up by a very small percentage. Which it went up. I'm not saying it didn't go up. But this is a more realistic view. Just recently, this happened to me. I was on negotiations for the past 2 years, I still am. I developed a graph that showed costs in one area going down, where costs in the second area were coming up, and they were starting to come towards each other, looking like they were going to meet. My graph looked like this. I sent it to a colleague who wanted to make it look more drastic. They took all my dead space down here away, and the graph went like this. That's all it took. Same exact graph, but it was this effect versus that effect. It's very easy to do. Excel doesn't help. Excel doesn't help. It sometimes defaults to the wrong view. You have to make it go to the right view. You'll learn that here too. All right? So this is one of those things. Look at those graphs carefully. If they're talking about a huge difference, make sure the difference is being indicated hugely and not just kind of twisted hugely. All right. We mentioned this earlier, correlation versus causation. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier was the causation. What was the correlation we looked at earlier today? Remember what it was? That was a long time ago, I know. It was like an hour ago.